Hey everyone, my name is Kristen and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am still on winter break, about to go into my 4th and final semester of nursing school, which is so exciting. Now last week I asked everyone what study video you would like to see next on my channel, and OB won. So because I did study relatively the same way for both PEDS and OB, I am actually going to be combining this study video today and to let you know how I personally studied for PEDS and OB. So if you are interested, just go ahead and keep watching. One quick announcement, I am still doing a giveaway. I will go ahead and link that video right here. This is just a big thank you since I reached 1,000 subscribers. So if you are interested in going ahead and entering, just go ahead and follow the rules in the video. Alright y'all, now PEDS and OB are a little bit different. I know I mentioned in my semester 3 reflection video, OB for me was all new information other than, of course, you know, learning about your period and kind of the process that happens in the body when that occurs, as well as some hormonal things that go on in the body I already learned about in my endocrine class back in undergrad. For the most part, childbirth, antepartum, postpartum, all of that was pretty much new to me, and learning all the different complications that could occur before, during, and after pregnancy. And, you know, just learning how to take care of a newborn. I have in the past had newborn experience, but, you know, just learning from the nursing perspective, all that was new to me, and just learning on paper how to do a newborn assessment. And when it comes to PEDS, PEDS was like a med-surg class, but for children. So at first, I learned all about the developmental theories, just the background when it comes to PEDS, and then I dove into the different body systems and the different health conditions that are associated with that body system. So there was so much information for both of my classes, and in my semester 3, I took PEDS, OB, and community. So I tried my best to stay consistent with the study schedule and kind of just studying the same way that I know works best for me. And with all this brand new information that I had to learn, I really just wanted to make sure I was ingraining it into my brain. I'm gonna quickly go through before, during, and after class. Now I am going to be talking about most PEDS and OB together. There are just a couple slight differences that I will get to when that time comes. Before class. Now, my class this semester for both PEDS and OB were so different. They were asynchronous. I had to watch the lectures before class, and then I had to go to what was called a discussion session. These discussion sessions were 50 minutes long, and essentially they just consisted of Q&As. They had case studies we worked on together, or they even had things like debates and just random things we would talk about during our discussion sessions. So there was nothing ever really formal about them. There was never a lot of just lecture-based style in those discussions. So a lot of my learning happened outside of the classroom. And I think that is so important for me to say that my grades reflected my own personal learning. Really did have to be engaged in class, and you really did have to ask those questions and really take the time outside of class to make sure that you are studying the material. So before class, what I would do is I would watch those pre-recorded lectures that my professors put up on our webpage, and I would go ahead and I would actually listen to those on 2x speed. Yep, you are right. I listened to every one of my lectures on 2x speed. I love my professors, but I cannot sit there for an hour and listen to their voices if they're not in front of me going like this and like pointing at pictures. I lose focus so easily and I cannot concentrate. So I watch them all on 2x speed. And what I would do is I would have my PowerPoint pulled up while I was watching these lectures, and I would go ahead and just use that little note section below each slide, type in anything that I felt like was important that maybe they added in during the lecture. And my OB professor mainly read from the slide. She did add in information here and there, and then she would kind of go on tangents and talk about her own experiences, which were super helpful in some cases, and I would go ahead and make sure to write those scenarios down. But my PEDS professor, her PowerPoints were very bare-boned. There was not much to them. I was doing a lot of typing when it came to PEDS. After I listened to those lectures, I pulled out my handy dandy ATI books for both OB and PEDS. I'm holding them right. Okay, These things are my favorite. No, this video is not sponsored by ATI. Yes, I paid for these in my tuition. My school actually provides these ATI books and the online resource. Except for Community, these books are my best friends and I cannot recommend them enough. I know they can be a little bit expensive, so do not feel like you have to go out and buy these, but if you are looking for some supplemental material, I highly suggest either the Saunders or this ATI book. I used my Saunders book, which is this book right here, every once in a while. I didn't use it as much as I thought I would for Peds and OB. I'm gonna be completely honest. I actually turned to my ATI books more. And what I would do is after I was done listening to the lecture, I would go ahead and pull out my ATI books and just go through each section that I was currently studying. Now, most of these chapters in ATI, they are very short, no more than 10 pages, so it doesn't take that long for me to go through this information, and most of the time, my professor in OB covered all that material that I needed to know. So I really wasn't adding in a ton of notes when it came to OB. My professor's PowerPoint were the golden ticket for a good score. And just going to her discussions, a lot of the time she would hint at test questions and did a great job at kind of pointing the students in the right direction. Now, when it came to Peds, and this is one of the differences that I said I would get to, those PowerPoints were empty. A lot of the information that are actually in my study guides, which I will show you in a minute, come from this handy dandy Peds book or my lecture book as well. I actually utilized my Peds lecture book a lot throughout the semester, and I didn't sit there and read it word per word, but I did utilize a lot of the graphics in that book, and I actually did skim through some of the lectures that I was mostly confused on, like, what do you know, cardiac, we already know is my weak point. So I actually did utilize my textbook a lot, and I did ask my professor in office hours questions, but sometimes I felt like I benefited more from utilizing the textbook than asking questions, and that is totally okay, you know? So that is what I tended to resort to. Now, during my discussions, like I said, they were mainly Q&A. There were case studies we had to do. Now, I do just want to say when it comes to those discussion sessions, I didn't take too many notes, but I still did benefit from going. You know, that higher level thinking is needed for these case studies that my professors have, and even just the debates that we had in class. So I really did benefit from going, but it was just hard for me to take notes. Sometimes we would go from topic to topic, so it was just very hard for me to kind of write my own notes, especially during that time. So I didn't do it, but I know other classmates did, and they really benefited from those discussions. Now getting into what I did after class. All of my study guides are the same. They have not changed from when I posted that How I Take My Notes video, which I will post right here. However, I did not write these notes out. This past semester, there was so much information for Peds and OB that I needed to know. I didn't feel like writing till my hand fell off, so I decided to type until I got super tired of typing. I have my Peds study guide right here and my OB study guide right here. This is just the first exam that I took out. You can see that they are definitely typed out, outline method, and you can see that at the top, I have my gray highlighted main point topic. Now that follows throughout my study guides. That has never changed. I love that gray color. It's just very subtle. I don't like my notes to be 12 different colors. I never have. That can be very distracting for me because I lose focus so easily. So something like this, plain, boring, just works best for me, you know? And there are times where I do put color in my notes. You'll see I have little sections that are colored. That actually helps make it stand out more. So when I'm taking an exam, I can be like, wow, I know exactly what section because I can think of the photo in my head that I'm looking at and recall that information in my head whenever I'm on the exam. So for me, just having a little bit of color helps me just memorize that information easiest, but that doesn't always work for everyone. Now those gray highlighted topics are new slides. My professors do a great job, I don't know why, but they do, of going through the information very chronologically and in order, and then the information just keeps building on itself. And I love how it starts from very basic information to getting into the nitty-gritty details of what I need to know. So I love just following my professor's PowerPoints, starting at the beginning and building my way up into the most important information. I know another way you can think of it, especially when it comes to Peds, is kind of start with your background, work into like your ideology, the patho, then get into the clinical manifestations of when you are going to assess a patient, what might you see, and then kind of go into like the implementation and then the evaluation. So that is how a lot of my PEDS notes are laid out, just because I am learning all these health conditions. So I really did also follow my PEDS notes. However, I did also utilize that nursing process to organize my notes. Now, one thing that I definitely utilized in both PEDS and OB, and I'm so happy I did it, was using photos. I used so many graphics from my textbook. I used graphics from my PowerPoints. This was so helpful because I know I'm a visual learner. I put the pictures next to that information so I can visually see what I am currently studying. It has made my notes much more valuable to me just because I actually learn the information a lot better this way instead of just continuously reading all this black information. So I'm grateful that I did that, and as the semester went on, I learned about external fetal monitoring. So I actually put some of those photos and those strips just so I could learn and differentiate them better. I loved having them in my notes right next to the section I was talking about, and that really helped me in OB throughout the semester. For PEDS, my professor, like I said, PowerPoints, bare bones, wasn't much to them. So a lot of this information came from my book, came from the other class that was taking PEDS. I took their lecture notes as well, which was super helpful, and then watching videos. I watched Registered Nurse RN. Some of her notes ended up in my notes because it was super helpful to me. I also did follow having graphics in this study guide. I put lots of pictures, and I also incorporated tons of charts. Now these charts, especially when it comes to PEDS, you are learning how to take care of the different developmental stages. So these are different age groups of children that you are learning how to take care of. A lot of my notes are broken down into charts, and this was just the easiest way that I could learn. I have tons of charts throughout my notes. Like, look at this. Some of them are in my study guide, some of them are separate, and I have them laid out just on one page. Like, I know for the cardiac, I have a whole separate chart just on the cardiac disorders in a chart, although I do have them in an outline as well. If there's any recommendation that I can tell you for PEDS, organize the information by the different age group and specifically how you are going to provide care to that age group. A lot of my test questions were med-surg questions, but they were based on the age group. So you had to know how to provide nursing care to either an infant, toddler, preschooler, school-aged, and adolescent. So that is just a tip for you. Remember to organize by age group. That will be the most helpful to you. These study guides, every single one of them for exam 1, 2, and 3, and then the final, they were all done a week before the exam. Now, my professors were nice and they gave us kind of these exam outlines. They weren't really reviews. They kind of just had the name of the topic that you needed to know, and that was about it. I made sure that I took that outline and I kind of just went through and made sure that all that information ended up in my study guides. And just on top of utilizing the PowerPoints, I would actually go ahead and rewatch my professor's lecture again on 2x speed and put in any missing information in here as well. I would go through my study guide 2 to 3 times a day and focus on practice questions. Now, I absolutely loved Quizlet for practice questions, specifically for PEDS and OB. I didn't have too many ATI questions I could turn to, and the Saunders book had some as well, but I mainly benefited from using Quizlet, as well as the Davis's Success Series for OB, which I will put a picture of that book right here. That book I specifically used on my computer. That was full of Q&A questions, and that book helped me get through OB. It had so many great practice questions. Another resource of practice questions that I had for OB was my professor made every student come up with one NCLEX style question. So right before the exam, we would have an NCLEX style question document available to us, which was really nice because sometimes students would think of the most challenging questions, which would really get your brain thinking. So I absolutely love that idea. If you could suggest that to your professors, I highly recommend, because You know, when you're a student, you're trying to think of like, okay, well, what can I ask? And some of these questions were very difficult, way more difficult than the exam. And if you can answer those really difficult questions, then you can answer those test questions. The amount of practice questions that I did a day varied. It just depended on how many I could find on Quizlet, how many I could find in the Q&A success book. And normally I did like to keep those NCLEX style questions that the students in my cohort made till the day before the exam, just so I could use it as a guide to really figure out what last minute studying I needed to do. When it came to PEDS, I mainly just focused on Quizlet for practice questions. I didn't have the Davis's success book for PEDS. I thought about buying it, but I did not. I highly recommend, if you want to use the PEDS one, to go ahead and purchase it. This series has helped me throughout nursing school and all my other classes. I personally don't know why I didn't buy that book though, but I still got through PEDS. That is pretty much all I honestly did for PEDS and OB. I just made sure I watched the lectures beforehand, attended class, made my own study guides, utilized those PowerPoints. Once I was done with my study guides a week before the exam, then I would start practice questions and really utilizing those practice questions I found online, and then utilizing any extra resources I had for practice questions. And if I had any last minute questions, I would go ahead and email my professors. Most of the time they would be amazing at getting back to me before the exam, and I never had an issue. All right, y'all, that was definitely a fast video on how I studied for PEDS and OB. I really hope that was helpful. I've already done study videos of my general study routine, so I really just try to tailor it to each class. So hopefully this video made sense to you. And of course, if you have any questions or anything specifically regarding PEDS and OB, feel free to leave them down below. I can go ahead and try to answer anything to the best of my ability. If you liked this video, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe. Of course, join the community, join the new Facebook group. And of course, I always want to wish you good luck on your nursing journey.